So whether or not you're holding the kettlebell the way that it's kind of built for, or your bottoms up, either way, you're struggling with this wrist extension, with the grip, right? It's not like holding someone's hand. I invented Gripmod, so that's what this is right here. And it is an attachment for barbells, dumbbells, and kettlebells to make weightlifting a little bit more ergonomic for hand-to-hand.
Hello, and welcome back to Explaining Acro. I'm Ben, and today we're joined by my good friend Julia. Fun fact, we actually started doing Acro kind of around the same time at University of Maryland on the Gymkhana troupe, where we did stuff for 3 years together. Julia is also a very kind of scientifically and engineering oriented person. Unlike me, she managed to have a career in the circus. But at the same time, you did some graduate studies in geophysics, and in general, just like have an awesome mind for like figuring out why things work, which is exactly what we love here on the channel. So today we're going to dive in a little bit on some of the details that really enable us to really do the things that we want to do with our bodies, both athletically and artistically. So Julia, can you tell me a little bit about some of the like things that you've done in order to enable yourself to succeed as a performer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's so easy as an audience member to look at us on stage or maybe training videos on Instagram and think, oh, wow, they're naturally talented and they must just naturally be good at what they do, because they see just the few minutes or few seconds of what we do, right?
For sure.
And there's so much more to that goes into being a performer or being a strong base and flyer when it comes to acro. And for me, that looks like eating healthy, getting good sleep. I mean, these things that we hear time and time again.
Right.
But what made the biggest difference for me was strength training and being able to like build myself up in a way that was healthy. I had a lot of control over it, and being able to kind of compete against these other people who might just be in the gym doing their skills, whereas like I'm in the background focusing on other skills and strength training in a way that benefits what I do on stage without having to be physically doing those skills all the time.
Yeah, no, and like something that's worth calling out here is that like you're a base, I'm a base, and like, you know, I'm 5'6", you're shorter than that, and like, you know, at that kind of professional level, like they tend to, you know, professional bases tend to be considerably taller, almost exclusively male. And yeah, like the things that you're describing are exactly how you can succeed, you know, without looking like the kind of traditional concept of what a base is.
Well, absolutely, because I feel like progressing in skills for someone who's much larger working with a smaller flyer, you can follow these traditional progressions that we see in like sports acro, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and maybe for you, I don't want to speak for you, but
Yeah.
I think we have similar experiences where those progressions can be really tough because we can't just adjust the weight of our flyer. We
Right.
can't say, oh, I want to push to extension and okay, can you just take off 50 pounds so that I can work my way up to your weight, right? So for me, that comes with strength training, right? On a barbell, obviously you can't adjust the weight.
No, and absolutely too, like if you're not in a sports acro gym for like 4 or 5 hours a day, like in that setting, it's like, okay, you can just do like 1,000,000 reps with your flyer or whatever. But, you know, you're working with like a performing partner, like, hey, can you just hold a handstand here for like 20 minutes while I get like my reps in? Like that's not a reasonable thing to ask of another person.
Yeah, exactly.
So while you mentioned the importance of nutrition and sleep and really all those things that we think about, strength training is something that I think you're certainly a bit of an expert in. It's something that I think a lot about and we've wanted to bring to the channel more. And, you know, in the past, we've kind of talked about there being a couple kind of main patterns that we use as bases, like push pressing, squatting, hinging, and then, you know, some kind of weighted carry, typically, more of like kind of like a waiter carry than a suitcase carry, perhaps, just because of like what we're doing in hand-to-hand. And I thought it might be nice to just, you know, talk about some of our favorite exercises in each of these patterns and maybe talk about how they really apply to acro.
Yeah. So, I mean, the key word you said was push. I think a lot of what we do as flyers as bases, is push.
Absolutely.
Right. And I guess we can carry that to flyers too. But for me, I've always been a base. And so that's the mindset that I'm in, is when I strength train is push.
Yeah.
I like that you said squat and hinge too, because we don't want to forget about those either.
No, definitely not. And if we're thinking, in the sports acro sense, like the cannonball is very much a hinge movement. Kind of the thing that blew my mind working with Jack Atherton was thinking of the pitch as a hinge movement instead of a squat. Like pulling is important for like balance and things like that. But like the things that let us do what we do, they're mostly pushing.
I want to point out that pull is so important too, because we want to maintain balance in our bodies. Absolutely. And for health and safety.
Yeah, no, and when you're incorporating that pull training, you're able to be, maybe like look at some antagonistics a little bit more specifically, but you can do a little bit more bodybuilding style specific stuff because there isn't that direct carryover that you're necessarily looking to get. But with like the overhead work, I'm very curious to hear like what you've been doing for that.
That is such a huge focus for me, because that is something that I find looks very impressive on stage. And I just really enjoy pressing to extension. I just think it's a really fun, exciting skill to do.
Absolutely.
That's a little bit more static, right? And because on stage, because that's where my mind is, right? As a professional performer, I think, okay, what looks good on stage?
Right.
And the taller you can be, the more impressive things look to an audience member who maybe doesn't understand the intricacies of what we do.
Yeah.
And so, to answer your question in, what do I focus on? I really like to look at military presses, for example, whether that be with a barbell, a dumbbell, even a kettlebell.
Yeah.
Especially turn it bottoms up. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking about a big challenge there, which is great because we want to challenge our stability, not just the strength.
Right. Yeah. No, like a flyer is not a fixed implement that's like the center of mass is right over your hand. It's distributed kind of awkwardly. There's all sorts of balance and stuff that's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also like a big fan of like that kind of normal like military press, overhead press type of thing. I'm interested if you've ever played around with like seated variations. I found those are kind of nice as like a once a week thing in order to get some volume in, but not be as taxing, on the back or things like that, particularly when you're doing like a lot of training volume.
Yeah. I actually don't do a lot of seated, but that is such a great idea because it challenges your stability even more. I think as bases, we can easily walk around when we're standing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that's cheating because it's not, but it's different.
Right.
And my challenge with the seated is the flexibility and making sure that I'm engaging the right muscles.
Yeah.
Because I find, especially when I'm coaching other bases, I find that if I'm working with men, stereotypically, and this is not always true,
for sure,
but stereotypically the shoulder angle is a lot more closed. And I struggled with that myself for quite some time. So I have a lot of sympathy for that. And so seated and trying to push to extension in a military press, for example, can be challenging if you're trying to keep your arms in.
Yeah.
And open the shoulders at the same time, because that's a lot of active flexibility.
Yeah, if you have like a 15-degree incline or something like that, it's like 75-degree incline, so like 15 shy of 90, then you might be in like a bit of a better position in terms of range of motion than if you're like right here and then it's almost closer to behind the neck press.
Because the important thing when we strength train as bases is to imitate what we're doing with a flyer, right?
Yes.
And so if my shoulder angle is really closed, obviously that's something to work on, and that's another story.
Right.
But at the same time, we don't want to just wait for the shoulder flexibility to open up to strength train. Right. So we have to find ways where we can do it safely and ergonomically.
Nice. Yeah. Kind of on that vein of like practicing the way you're going to be like performing, right? When you do hand or things like that, I imagine that you probably have like some slight stagger in the feet. Some amount of the time. In the gym, are you like doing your pressing with your legs, kind of like hip width across, super square, or are you playing a little bit with an offset in the feet there?
I love that question because I honestly do both. And the reason for that is because I'm also a mid. Sometimes I'm basing a hand-to-hand on someone's shoulders. Obviously, you can't be staggered, right? So I try to mix in both, also for keeping my body even, right? Again, going back to that being healthy side of things, right? We don't just want to be strong, we want to be healthy while we're strong.
Absolutely.
And so always staggering my feet. So for example, for me, I love my left foot forward.
Same.
Always staggering that way causes some imbalance, and we want to avoid that.
For sure. And are you incorporating like any type of push press or things like that? I don't know how much like dynamic stuff you end up performing, but like I found that to be very effective, and particularly performing too. Like no one cares if you're using a little bit of leg drive to get that fly overhead to extension.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, we want to get the legs involved, because one thing I do see with my bases when I'm coaching, especially bases who are newer or don't come from like an acrobatic or dance background, is there's a lot of separation with the muscle groups, especially if they're coming from a gym where they're used to, okay, we're doing bicep curls. Now, we have our back and shoulders day, right? It's very separated.
Yeah.
And we want the body to move all together, right? We're all one unit. And that's just going to make you so much more powerful. So incorporating exercises that are full body, so beneficial.
So I think we can clearly talk about pressing all day and spend all our time in the gym just pressing. But there are other like muscle groups and patterns that are important. So like in particular, like squatting and hinging really matter in acro. Like you were talking about like midding 3 highs, basing 3 highs, and really just like getting that leg drive matters a lot. So can you maybe talk to me a bit about like what you do in the gym to ensure that you have that kind of like strong lower body and posterior chain?
Yeah, I always worry about my lower back.
Yeah.
And I think maybe most of us do, if I had to guess, because we can easily put it into a compromising position.
Right.
And with acro, if you don't have the technique perfect or near perfect, you are putting it into a compromising position, especially with the hinge or the squat. And I like to really focus on progressions with those skills with weight training so that I can learn the technique. That's the really nice thing. Again, going back to what we were saying, we can't adjust the flyer's weight, but we can adjust a barbell's weight. And so if I can work progressions with weights in that capacity, then I can also be simultaneously working on my technique.
So are you looking at like Romanian deadlifts, power cleans, good mornings? Like what are some of the things that you are staples for you?
Yeah, good mornings.
Good mornings, yeah.
Yeah, they're I have a love-hate relationship with them because again, I'm so concerned about my lower back and so concerned about my technique. But what I find actually really helpful is just filming when I do them so that I can watch it back, check out that technique, make sure I'm keeping myself safe and healthy.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense. And it's definitely like a game of like figure out what exercise works for you. So for me, for example, I have like a very long torso and like relatively short femurs. So like a good morning for me is just the leverages are absolutely awful. And like even with a bar, like they kind of bother my back. But with something like a Romanian deadlift, I'm able to like keep the bar, kind of pressed against my legs and closer to the midline. And I still get like a bit of a low back stimulus, but like I'm able to like load that exercise and feel like very good at it. So just like experimenting with the patterns and finding what works for you. Because I definitely know people too who like Romanian deadlifts don't work at all for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always say this, right? Everybody is different.
Yeah.
But I think that translates not just in acro, right? Because I think it's so clear in acro. When you're on a different base or you're working with a different flyer, so much changes. But the same is with weightlifting. And I think you bring up a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there other types of things you're doing like for your legs or posterior chain that like you would consider staples?
I mean, we love a good squat.
Yeah.
And squat variations.
For sure.
Right? There's a long list of types of squats that you can do in the gym.
If you had to pick like 2 squats, so like say like a main one and then a favorite variation, like what would that be for you?
Well, taking a traditional squat and adjusting the tempo is really big for me.
Yeah.
Looking at the eccentric, maybe slowing that down, and then a powerful push back up. So that's big for me is playing with that tempo, whether it's like a 1, 2, 3 down and then a quick up, like I was saying, or I mean, there's so many other ways you can play with that.
And when you say a traditional squat, I imagine you're probably referring to like higher bar placement, like a high bar squat, and like really focusing on like knees out and forward a bit, as opposed to that kind of like hip dominant or powerlifting style squat.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then just in terms of like informing variations too, like when we're doing acro, like the weight is almost always in front of us, or in the case of like a 2 eye or 3 eye or something like that, like kind of straight down on us. And that like more powerlifting style squat, the weight is loaded more towards the back. So I think that, high bar squat, I would agree with you 100% as like the kind of like main movement in my program. And then if I'm looking at squat variations, it's like things like front squats, maybe goblet squats in some cases, safety squat bar, really just anything that's like kind of cheating the weight towards the front a little bit, I think is a great variation.
Yeah, well, I mean, you asked for 2 from me. I gave you one.
That's true. Go.
No, I was just going to agree with you. That
Yeah.
the front squat is where it's at. Always, without a doubt, when I'm in the gym training with acro in mind, always a front squat.
Yeah. And what do you do on hand placement there?
Oh, great question, because that can be really wonky, especially as a female.
Yeah.
I've learned that we have anatomy that's different that affects the front squat in a lot of ways.
For sure.
And the comfortability of that. And also, women, we don't really have broad shoulders typically or big lats. Typically, I mean, of course, everyone's different.
She has a wingsuit.
I do have rather large lats.
Yeah.
But I don't want to pretend everyone does. And so I like to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
And for me, I try to keep my hands in as far as closer together as much as I can. There is a limit because of comfortability.
For sure.
And we want to be mindful of the wrists. And I have a solution for that I've come up with that really helps with the front squat a lot.
Oh, we're going to have to get into that in a little bit, but I think I know where you're heading with that. And kind of where I think you're hinting to is, so like, you have I don't actually have the mobility, but like this kind of like Olympic weightlifting style, like front squat, more the bodybuilding style, but
yes.
You can also totally hold a bar just here. And because we're like doing that in hand-to-hand or foot-to-hand a lot, like there's a lot of carryover.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the final pattern that I really want to talk about is really just like stabilizing this kind of like front rack, hand-to-hand position and stuff like that. And like something that I found has made a big difference for me in the gym is not actually a bottoms up kettlebell carry where you're holding the handle, but like a tops up approach where I'm holding the bottom of the kettlebell, really heavy kettlebell in this kind of front rack position. And then I'm just walking. And I found that's helped a lot with my one arms. But I've definitely noticed that it's a little bit more wrist extension that I would like. And, I'm definitely training like this, which is where I've had some problems in the past, but it doesn't feel great on the wrist and it doesn't really stimulate a hand-to-hand very well. So I'm just kind of curious about like things you've done in the gym. And I also know that you've built a little something.
Yeah.
So,
well, kind of like what you do. I actually do the bottoms up.
Yeah.
But I find that for me, that grip also isn't conducive for hand-to-hand.
Yeah.
So whether or not you're holding the kettlebell the way that it's kind of built for, or your bottoms up, either way, you're struggling with this wrist extension, with the grip, right? It's not like holding someone's hand.
Yeah, no, and like flyers, they get like their slanted blocks that they can like practice on, but we don't really have the same thing until you got around to it.
Yeah, so I'll show you. I invented Gripmod, so that's what this is right here. And it is an attachment for barbells, dumbbells, and kettlebells to make weightlifting a little bit more ergonomic for hand-to-hand. So instead of gripping a bar like this, like we've been talking about this whole time, and most of us do, now you can grip the Gripmod instead, and you have this more open palm grip now, and you have the fingers kind of running up where simulating kind of a wrist.
Yeah.
You have these fingers wrapping around on either side, kind of like you would pull into like the top of someone's hand. And this is where the bar will go through. And it's great because it's adjustable for different bar sizes, which, because we're working on barbells or dumbbells sometimes, and then the kettlebells too, this fits on quite a few different sizes. So that's been nice too. But I don't know. I mean, a little biased, obviously, because it's my baby, but
for sure,
I love it for my strength training.
Thanks for coming on the channel, Julia. It was great having you and getting to finally get my hands on the Gripmod. If you guys want to see any of our information, it'll be down below. But if there's anywhere in particular folks should find you, or like ways that they can learn more about Gripmod, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about building a community at this point, right? Trying to get this into other people's hands, because originally I made it for me, but I'm learning that it's really for you all. So like you said, follow what's below us, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome, yeah. And if you want to see more of Julia, let us know in the comments section down below, and I think we can make that happen.
I would love that.
Till next time.